Historically, the WWE and every other televised wrestling promotion has tried to play on viewers' feelings and emotions to get people invested in upcoming matches and storylines. Sympathy and empathy, anticipation and excitement, sadness, happiness. There's many ways for a company to play on how you feel in order to make big matches a lot more meaningful, to make storylines more personal for an individual viewer. There's one emotion though that has been incredibly hit or miss for the WWE, and that emotion is fear. Truly scary moments in wrestling are extremely rare. When they get it right, it can be good, but the WWE's attempts at horror usually end up looking very campy and goofy. It can sometimes lead to you feeling embarrassed instead of feeling frightened. In the past, the WWE have on occasion gotten it right, and you'll maybe notice that scary moments in wrestling were way more effective when you yourself were a young viewer watching at home. But generally speaking, the WWE's attempts at horror usually end up more funny than scary. What we're going to do today is look at a WWE Network upload from last year where the company listed what they feel are the scariest moments in World Wrestling Entertainment, and I'm also going to add more scary moments afterwards that didn't make the cut. We'll start off looking at the network upload, then move on to other unlisted moments towards the end of the video. I'd be interested in hearing which moments in wrestling scared you as a kid or even as a grown-up, and maybe we can revisit this topic again down the road, so let me know in the comments. And I know how scary watching WWE Raw can be in 2021 by the way, so you don't need to remind me of that. Okay, so this WWE Network video gets presented by the Boogeyman, so I'm sure we'll be seeing a few of his skits during this presentation. The first clip we see is from Raw back in March of 1996, Diesel vs Barry Horowitz. This is actually a good one. I've talked about this a few times on the channel, and somehow we always come back to this clip, but yeah, I actually think the WWF done a great job here, and this one is pretty creepy. So, Diesel was on his way to wrestling The Undertaker at WrestleMania 12, and the dead man wanted to play some mind games with Big Daddy Cool. One of those mind games was forcing Diesel to look at himself laid out in a coffin. That's actually Diesel inside the coffin, by the way. Raw was taped here, so they had the ability to add in extra footage, and so Big Nash hopped in the coffin earlier in the day to get this quick clip. After Diesel sees himself in the casket, he gets totally freaked out, completely lost for words. He doesn't ham it up by screaming and shouting, he instead tries to process what he just saw, and he walks back up the entranceway confused and worried. It's a believable reaction, and that's why I thought it worked really well. The WWE or WWF were doing some silly stuff during the New Generation era, but this I thought was good. So yeah, a good start to this list. Next up is a clip from SmackDown in December of 2005. More mind games from The Undertaker. I think we'll be seeing the Phenom quite a lot in this video. Randy Orton is in the middle of a heated rivalry with the dead man, and Bob Orton is also involved in the angle. Randy begins hallucinating and he momentarily sees his dad covering in what I think is supposed to be blood. This network video is making an effort to cover its own ass, it seems. The episode of SmackDown that this came from does have the uncensored version. It's also available on the network, so I've no idea why it's censored on the Scariest Moments video. Anyway, yeah, it's a pretty creepy visual. Bob Orton bladed during a Hell in a Cell match featuring Orton and The Undertaker, and this blade job would eventually result in his WWE release, giving this moment right here on SmackDown a certain amount of irony. SummerSlam 1991 next. Whoever edited this video on the network got the year wrong, by the way, and technically it happened after the pay-per-view, but nonetheless, it's Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth's wedding reception. Everything was going well until Randy and Elizabeth started opening up their wedding presents. Elizabeth opens up a gift box and inside is a Cobra, a present from Jake the Snake Roberts. Elizabeth jumps back and The Undertaker comes along to take out Randy Savage, and Jake then begins tormenting poor Elizabeth on her wedding night. Sid Justice ends up making the save and Jake and Taker are forced to leave. Was it scary? Yeah, it probably was for Miss Elizabeth. For the viewer at home though, it maybe feels more like a funny prank. Still, it was a different time and a different place. Not much here in terms of scaring the viewer at home, but still a pretty memorable moment from WWE history. SmackDown, September 18th, 2009, and I'm going to have to double check every one of these dates now, seeing as they messed up the previous clip. At Breaking Point 2009, The Undertaker defeated CM Punk in a submission match, but Teddy Long came out and he said the Hell's Gate submission hold was barred from WWE. The match was restarted, Punk locked in the Anaconda Vice, and the match ended with The Undertaker clearly not submitting, but Punk still got awarded the victory. On SmackDown, Teddy Long came out and he admitted it was all pre-planned to stop The Undertaker from winning the title. Long was motivated by financial gain, he apologised to The Undertaker, and the SmackDown general manager was escorted to the parking area where his limousine was waiting. Teddy gets in, he tells his driver to get him out of the arena, but then the doors lock and it's revealed that The Undertaker is sitting in the driver's seat. The Undertaker says this.
Buckle up, Teddy.
It's so funny. Some voice changers are used when Teddy screams that he wants out of the limo, smoke fills the vehicle, and the limo drives off with poor Teddy Long in a state of panic. It's not scary at all, it's absolutely hilarious. The dead man finally getting revenge for all those one-on-one with The Undertaker matches. We've got some more Undertaker stuff next, and this one was actually pretty creepy. The Undertaker sacrificing Dennis Knight on WWF Raw back on the 11th of January 1999. The more demonic side of The Undertaker was on display during his Ministry of Darkness days, and when we talk about The Undertaker being legitimately scary, I feel this incarnation of the Phenom done an excellent job. And well, what can I say here, it's a fucking sacrifice on a live episode of Raw, complete with spooky orchestra music, The Undertaker speaking in tongues, Dennis Knight becoming Midian after drinking from a chalice filled with The Undertaker's blood, the whole 9 yards. Again, this network presentation is edited, so you'll have to look up the full episode of Raw to see how far they go here, and this video would probably get taken down if I showed the whole thing, but yeah. In terms of freaky stuff that happened in wrestling, this has to sit pretty high on the list. It's completed with The Undertaker's symbol getting set on fire, and the classic Undertaker theme playing in the arena. Great work here in setting the tone for The Undertaker's Ministry of Darkness. In terms of creepy stuff happening in WWE, this is one of my favourites. Kane setting fire to The Undertaker's casket at the 1998 Royal Rumble is up next, and honestly, I'd maybe put the debut of Kane on the list before this moment right here. I think the lights going out for the first time, the church organs starting off Kane's entrance music, and just the ring being soaked in red lights as we see Kane for the very first time, left a much greater impression than the 1998 Royal Rumble stuff. Kind of the fear of the unknown and not knowing what to expect, but yeah, Taker thought Kane was on his side at the Rumble, but it turns out he wasn't. The dead man gets locked in a casket, Shawn Michaels wins the casket match, and The Undertaker is brought up the entranceway while still locked inside the casket. After doing a little work with an axe, Kane sets the dead man alight and the Royal Rumble pay-per-view comes to an end. Was it scary? I didn't think so. Was it cool to see? Absolutely. The network show then gives us more Undertaker content next, and this time it was the debut of Mankind. Happening the night after WrestleMania 12, Mankind made his WWF debut in spectacular fashion by completely destroying The Undertaker. Mankind vignettes had aired on WWF television for weeks, and finally, Mick Foley had arrived in the WWF and he made a statement by taking out the legendary Dead Man. Not scary, more like absolutely awesome. Fans in attendance knew this was Cactus Jack, and while Taker getting beaten up would normally upset his most die-hard supporters, others were excited to see Foley in the World Wrestling Federation, and maybe they were intrigued by his new, unique look. Mankind was relentless here also, by the way. He showed absolutely no fear when applying the mandible claw to the dead man. Seeing as he presented this show, it's only right that the Boogeyman got a few clips too. Saturday night's main event on March 18th, 2006 featured a backstage segment where Booker T and Sharmell were celebrating after pulling a fast one on Teddy Long and a company doctor. The Boogeyman interrupted the party, randomly hanging off a wall and laughing at Booker and Sharmell. Next we had The Miz on the December 15th, 2006 episode of SmackDown. He was doing this thing where he faced his fears in preparation for wrestling the Boogeyman on pay-per-view. The Miz was going to eat from 3 different platters. The first had a pig's tongue, the second was supposed to be monkey brains, and the last had worms. Miz couldn't eat the worms, he tapped out, but then the Boogeyman appeared from under the table and he gave Miz and Crystal a good old fright. Again, it's more funny than scary, especially the Boogeyman's little look at the camera after emerging from the plate of worms. We've got an absolute classic next, and I'd like to hear from people who watched this when they were kids. Papa Shango, the WWF's resident voodoo practitioner, put a curse on the Ultimate Warrior on the May 16th, 1992 episode of Superstars. Warrior just got done destroying Brian Knobbs in the middle of the ring, but then Papa Shango comes out. Shango puts a curse on the Ultimate Warrior, a curse that gives Warrior bad stomach pains, either that or he had a bad curry the night before. But anyway, Warrior gets brought to the back where he proceeds to throw up on a poor doctor. Whatever this curse was, it was some serious shit by the looks of things. I uploaded a Papa Shango video quite some time ago and you guys seem to like the character, so let me know what you thought of this moment in particular. Another iconic moment next that again I find more awesome than scary, but if you had a real fear of snakes, or if you were a young viewer, then this would be quite traumatic. The November 23rd, 1991 episode of Superstars featured a segment that would progress the Randy Savage vs Jake Roberts feud. Jake said that Randy was afraid to step into the ring, but of course, Randy wanted a fight on this particular night. Thanks to an over-concerned referee, Jake was able to take advantage and Randy took a beating. With the Macho Man tied up on the ropes, Jake's Cobra makes another appearance, and this time the WWF went one step further by having the Cobra actually bite the Macho Man. Pretty graphic for the time. What most people forget though is the fact that Randy sold the venom afterwards. He started acting delirious and confused as he bumped around the ring and he fell off the stretcher. Good stuff here that legitimately made kids cry in the audience. One of the best things to come out of this segment though was this shot right here. Absolutely brilliant. If you were a young Randy Savage fan at the time, I think this could have been quite traumatic to see. Today, it holds up as an awesome moment of early 90s WWF, and seeing the Cobra bite Randy is still really cool. Up next on this network show is the December 14th, 1998 episode of Raw, and what I think is the very first ever bloodbath from the Brood, but I could be wrong. Tiger Ali Singh makes his entrance, but the lights go out and the Brood's music begins to play. Tiger gets out of the ring only to get surrounded by Gangrel, Edge and Christian. He takes a beating, and when the lights come back on, Tiger is covered in what the WWF would eventually call a red liquid. Did you see Seth Rollins taking the bloodbath recently? The colour of the liquid had to be changed in order to get it on live TV. It was called a Brood bath. Nonetheless, Seth sold it wonderfully. The next one we have I thought was pretty well done too. The Miz was in the middle of a rivalry with Bray Wyatt, or The Fiend, and Wyatt had been using Miz's daughter Monroe to get the upper hand. During an interview with Renee Young at the Miz's home, Wyatt played more mind games when Mercy the Buzzard, Abby the Witch and Huskus the Pig were seen on Monroe's baby monitor. The camera cuts off and then we see Bray Wyatt, and this caused the Miz and Maurice to rush up the stairs to check on their daughter. When they got into the room, all that was there was Monroe and a Fiend doll, and although you may have certain thoughts about young actors like this who have no idea what's going on, you gotta give it up for little Monroe here, who pointed at the doll with a concerned look on her face. Pretty effective stuff here. It's just a bit hard at times, for me anyway, to take The Miz seriously in segments like this. Good stuff though, still pretty creepy. Speaking of creepy, Extreme Rules 2014, John Cena has his hands full with the Wyatt family inside a steel cage. Cena goes to escape out the door, but then that Wyatt family transition plays and the lights go out. When they come back on, there's a kid standing on the steps singing "He's got the whole world in his hands." If that's not creepy enough, the kid's voice has been pitched way down, and well, have a listen. Nightmare fuel, absolute nightmare fuel. The singing leads to Cena taking a loss and Bray Wyatt escapes the cage. The little kid smiles and Wyatt gives him a hug. Yeah, I find this kind of stuff more disturbing than, say, Kane setting a casket on fire. Little Johnny here is apparently the son of Jameson Winger, co-host of the old Bobby Heenan show. Anyway, the network show wraps up with another Bray Wyatt moment. October 11th, 2019 SmackDown. The Fiend pulls Seth Rollins under the ring. Seth re-emerges and the Fiend pops his head up for a brief moment before appearing at the entranceway seconds later. Some of the stuff the Fiend done on TV was good, no doubt, but all his momentum was stopped quite early on, and I think a lot of that happened when the Fiend battled Seth Rollins inside Hell in a Cell. Still, it was good while it lasted. For me, the scariest things in wrestling are the unintentional botched moves or potentially career-threatening moments. I'll never forget feeling genuine concern for Sting when he had that match with Seth Rollins at Night of Champions 2015, and that's the best example I can give here. He took 2 buckle bombs and you knew something was wrong afterwards. He was struggling to stand up, he fell to the ground after an Irish whip, and I honestly thought that was it for the Stinger. Couldn't imagine how it must have felt being in that ring. Steve Austin taking the piledriver at SummerSlam 1997 is another difficult one to watch, and when Austin couldn't stand up, even being a whole lot younger, I remember knowing that what I was seeing was real. Austin dragging his feet while being assisted to the back is one of those things I always remember about it. Foley getting thrown off Hell in a Cell is awesome, but seeing it live was nothing but pure shock. Jim Ross's call after the bump has kinda became a meme in recent times, but it absolutely added to the shock of what we just saw. Consider yourself lucky if you saw this live or if you had no prior information about the bump when you watched King of the Ring 1998. The impact of the move has been lost over time, I feel, because we've seen it hundreds of times. But let's check out some other scary moments that were left off the WWE Network show. I've done a little digging online for some inspiration here, by the way, as stuff that other people found scary when they were younger might not match up with what I found scary. But I will start off with one I remember watching, and I also remember the moment sticking in my head for days afterwards. The Undertaker speaking from his casket at the 1994 Royal Rumble I thought was extremely effective. The way Taker's body was lit up with the negative camera filter was very memorable, and Taker seemingly ascending from the casket afterwards was also well done. The whole thing leaves an impression, especially on younger viewers. Sticking with The Undertaker, some people thought the WrestleMania 15 Hell in a Cell match was a little too much, thanks to what happened to the Big Boss Man. Again, Ministry of Darkness Undertaker just didn't care. Some fans remember JR getting set on fire by Kane and being absolutely horrified that this new unmasked Kane could be so relentless. I think this worked well because everyone was trying to make Kane see that his problems were psychological and not physical. And Kane, in character, felt that no one understood him or what he'd been through. One post from Reddit, made 6 years ago, was from a guy saying that Goldust sending flowers to Razor Ramon and the heart tattoo on the chest of Goldust freaked him out because he was too young to understand why a man would be trying to seduce another man. The Warrior getting locked in the Undertaker's casket on an April 1991 episode of Superstars sticks out for a lot of people. And yeah, watching this back, the WWF done a great job of creating a giant panic. Randy Savage and Roddy Piper done a good job too on commentary, highlighting how long the Warrior had been locked in and how long Warrior was unable to breathe. We can't seem to get away from The Undertaker here, as the next one that got brought up a few times was from the 2004 Great American Bash, where The Undertaker's longtime manager, Paul Bearer, was buried in cement. Someone commented about how Paul Bearer's screams were the worst part about it.
Pull the lever! What? What'd he do it?
Again, I thought it was quite funny. This next one was as unscripted as it gets, and it was not funny. The moment Jerry Lawler suffered a heart attack on Monday Night Raw. It was a very real moment that completely shocked everyone, from the viewers at home to Jerry's broadcast partner Michael Cole. You could also see the competitors in the ring looking down at the commentary table to see what was going on. And there's never a good time to suffer a heart attack, but it happening on live TV would probably be one of the worst times possible. Out of respect for Lawler, there was no commentary for the final half hour of Raw, and I think that made it feel a whole lot more real. Here's one that nobody talks about, and I honestly forgot it happened. CM Punk threatening to jump off the Titantron while he was in the Nexus group. Punk said he would jump as a way to initiate himself into the new Nexus to show how committed he was to the group, but Punk trolled everyone and he had a harness the whole time. I'm not so sure if this was scary or someone posting this because they're just big CM Punk fans. Not for a moment do you think that Punk was gonna do it, but maybe the younger audience did, or indeed, in the words of CM Punk on this evening, maybe the gullible did. Brock Lesnar destroying Zach Gowen in front of his mom was enough to leave a lot of people unsettled, it seems. It does kinda stick with you after you see it, but what's interesting here is that Zach said Brock Lesnar took extremely good care of him. It looks absolutely brutal, but Zach said it was no worse than taking normal bumps. I'll end this video here then and let you guys take over in the comments section. I know we'll have a ton of funny comments about watching scary modern wrestling, but I will check out the comments and maybe come back to this topic if we have enough to work with. Horror, fear, anxiety, panic, all these things have a place in wrestling if done right. When it's done wrong, it turns into a comedy show most of the time, and to be honest, I think the WWE get it wrong more times than they get it right. But when they do get it right, it can work wonders and get a lot of people talking. Some people don't like these scary moments in wrestling because it makes wrestling feel even more scripted than what it already is, but I couldn't care less. Bring on the horror show and scary segments. The WWE lost its grip on reality a long time ago, so nothing should surprise us anymore. And remember guys, just because we may find some of the modern horror stuff hokey or silly, doesn't mean the younger audience can't enjoy this type of stuff. But with that, I'll say thank you very much for watching, I hope you enjoyed this one, and take care. A big shout out to Patreon Hall of Famers Jacob and Growing Up in Sin City 81. Jacob streams over on Twitch, his channel is JakeRose33, and he's been recently streaming the likes of Fallout 4, XCOM 2 and Star Trek Online. Check out his channel and let him know Wrestling Bio sent you. Growing Up in Sin City 81 has a unique YouTube channel filled with commercial blocks from all different channels throughout the 90s and even late 80s. Nearly 1,000 uploads and counting. Again, let him know you watch Wrestling Bios if you check out any of his stuff. Thanks to Jacob, Sin City 81 and everyone else supporting Wrestling Bios on Patreon.